What's up guys, it's NLW Figs here, back again with another video. I've done this kind of video before with the likes of AEW and NXT, but now I'm doing it with WWE RAW, and the simple question is RAW still good? Short answer no, but stay with me, I think it can be fixed. Now I know what you're thinking, you're just some mark on the internet. Yes I am, but I don't make this video to hate, far from it. I love fantasy booking, I love writing and creating my own shows with NLW, and I understand writing a show and considering all of these different factors going on with a company as large as the WWE means that the show is naturally going to have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and I get that, but I think getting back to basics would very much help Raw, and I'm going to tell you how I would do it. Stick around to the end as I'm going to be announcing a brand new series on the main channel related to this, but before I get into the video, make sure you leave a like and leave a comment as well. Do you still watch Raw? If so, why? And do you like it? And if you don't watch it, let me know as well. Why don't you leave it here in the comments below? So, without further ado, let's get into the video. So first thing obviously is it's too long. The show's too long. 3 hours is a very long time, but I get that with, you know, a lot of extra revenue that comes in with that. Besides, people will sit down and watch football for nearly 3 hours every week. What makes wrestling different? Personally, I think they could have a lot of benefit from having a separate hour at the end, whether that be cruiserweight wrestling, a women's hour. Hell, they could have done Raw Underground, but you know, they don't stick with an idea and they don't really commit to it. They had the opportunity to do something similar when they had that Raw Dark thing a couple of years ago that was supposed to be an edgier hour of Raw, but again, no one remembers it because they don't stick with it and they don't make any effort with it. Second point, I would implement a no rematch rule. Now what I mean by that is, unless there's a storyline reason for having a rematch, for instance like a best of 3 series or a title rematch, then people don't need to see it. The New Day versus Elias and Jackson Ryker over and over again, you know, you don't need to see that more than once. They have a stacked roster which they don't utilise to its full effect. Case in point, you got a guy like Drew Gulak, who could either be a really good comedy character or a really serious technical wrestler. So use him. You know, people hate on Vince Russo all the time, but one of the key things in the Attitude Era that he did was that everyone had a storyline, everyone had a character. Honestly, I think if they went back to basics, maybe throw a couple more gimmicks in there, you know, have a little flowchart of, okay, this person dislikes this person, but they're aligned with this guy. Sort of like WWE Universe mode. Something that says, okay, what makes this character tick? Things like that. In wrestling, it's the nature of the beast. Things are unpredictable, but if you've got a clear plan of people's motivations and where you want wrestlers to go, I think the people watching would appreciate that. And you don't need to rewrite the scripts moments before you go on air, just implement some more long-term planning, more character work for the wrestlers. I think that would benefit them a lot. Another thing is 50-50 booking. Now, obviously, it's a difficult thing to navigate, and I'm not saying they should implement a ranking system like AEW, because that's proven to be a tad too confusing in a storyline sense, but if you have it behind the scenes, like a shoot ranking system, where the writers can see who's racking up wins and who needs to rack up more wins in order to be a contender for a championship. So, on AEW, for instance, you see the story of Hangman Page picks up a lot of wins, runs into a brick wall that is Brian Cage, and then he's set back a tiny bit, and you can tell though he's still destined for greater things in the future because he's got that solid foundation of wins. On Raw, you don't necessarily need to have it as a storyline factor, but it can help prevent the writers from doing things like 50-50 booking, where, you know, you're booking people strong and then they lose and then the next week they win, but it's kind of 50-50. So they got a strong win record so that when they do eventually challenge for a title, it's not out of nowhere and they don't seem like geeks. For example, Humberto Carrillo and Ricochet, two guys who, you know, they get surprise roll-ups on the champion, Sheamus, but why should anyone care about that? Sheamus is a beast, let him be a beast, and you're making him look like an idiot getting rolled up by these two guys who are teaming together, but they look like heels. You know, get that face-heel dynamic as well back on track, I think, is an issue that they've been struggling with. And that's another thing. It seems to be like overexposure is a problem with a lot of the wrestlers on Raw. I don't think people are that hyped to see Ricochet versus Sheamus because we've seen it already. And this goes back to the rematch thing, likewise with Humberto and Sheamus over and over again. And that's why I think the no rematch rule would be good if you built, okay, one match, maybe 2 matches in a feud down the line. We don't need to see them involved with each other every single week. There needs to be variety. And there is something about overexposure with DQ and count-out finishes too. It's difficult to get invested in a match if you know it's going to end in some sort of schmoz ending. With NLW, personally, I don't book matches that I feel I can't book a finish for. For example, if both guys can't afford to lose, I'm not going to put that match on. Mix things up a little bit. Have Bobby Lashley go up against the likes of Humberto Carrillo every so often because, you know, gives Humberto a bit of exposure in the main event scene, and, you know, he may lose, but he's also got a strong performance, and Lashley can look like a beast in the process. You can also build up Humberto's record later on with wins against the likes of Gulak, Ricochet if you need, and there's another guy, Angel Garza, for instance. Very charismatic, we've seen what he can do on NXT. Use that, promote him, push him further up the card. The trouble with Raw at the moment is you've got the main event scene, and then that's it, because there's no real mid-card to speak of. It's all quite lower card stuff. There needs to be like an upper mid-card feud going on, because Jeff Hardy, you know, he's finally getting some momentum on his side, but it's at the expense of Cedric. You know, have Jeff Hardy climb the mountain again, push him in the main event scene against Lashley, because it may be a hot take, but the only big star in WWE at the moment who people can't miss is Roman Reigns, because the character work of his is so on point. You get excited to see where the story goes. It's unpredictable in the sense that you don't know who's he's going to fight next, and there's multiple threads going on because you've got the stuff with Rey Mysterio, the Daniel Bryan arc, you know, the Usos as well, being at odds with Roman Reigns. I think that arc in itself is very good. Yes, SmackDown's not perfect, but it's shorter, it's more precise, and it's simpler storylines, I think. And, you know, on Raw, needs to be someone who's on the star power level of Roman Reigns, in my opinion. That's not Brock Lesnar coming back for a part-time basis. And that brings me on to the topic of heat. It's important that the heels look strong every now and again to make the babyfaces sympathetic. You want to root behind them, but if every single week the heels are standing tall, it's not a feel-good show. At WrestleMania, both the world champions, the heel world champions, retain their titles, and it's difficult to get behind anyone on the show and for people to get over if you're not invested in the characters. And that's the thing about Triple H's comments. I get that people are fickle, you know, the fans tend to complain a lot. It's the nature of the beast, and he himself is in a tough spot to see the guys that he's building up in NXT get taken away and used in a manner that has gone to waste. You know, if you listen to the likes of Aleister Black talk about their creative ideas for their character and how they build really good long-term building of a storyline, I think there needs to be more open communication, or at least more cooperation with the talent in the direction that they go. Again, not everyone can be pushed, not everyone can be in the main event, but if you have little stories for everybody on your roster, I think that people will get invested in the characters more often than not. And people may think it's run its course, but even something like the 24/7 title can be used to develop characters, and it can be used for more than comedy. I think the Crash Holly stuff back in the day was fantastic, but you also had some very intense hardcore wrestling from the likes of Hardcore Holly in there, and there's a way to use it for a modern audience that not just have all the jobbers run after the 24/7 champion, you know? A little bit more in-depth character work is needed. And I think that a lot of the roster at the moment is miscast. You got Akira Tozawa dressed as a ninja, T-Bar still dressed like he's in Retribution, even though Retribution has been over for like 2 months. They left, so why are they, you know, still dressing like they're a member of the group? Mustafa Ali as well, the leader of Retribution, had a strong thing going, and now you barely see him on Raw. I think that he's so miscast. He should be a great babyface because he's a really likeable dude. John Morrison as well. I think they could be doing a lot more. They seem to have pigeonholed him as a tag wrestler with The Miz. And, you know, all these guys are treading water. They don't have anything real to sink their teeth into. They're just guys on the roster with no story going for them. And I think there's a lot of people stuck right now, and I think there could be a lot more crossing of storylines too. Everyone seems to be in their own lane, focused on their own stories. Have them branch out into other different problems, make it more dynamic like you would a soap opera. What makes this person tick? Who is he aligned with? Who does he dislike? Will that determine like what championships he gets and so forth? Different alliances that come into play. I love the Attitude Era because so many different stories interweave, and it's kind of the same in AEW at the moment. For instance, have Drew McIntyre start a mini feud with a guy on the undercard, and maybe it impact something later on in the upper card. I remember there was something going on between Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker, but Matt Hardy was kind of involved as well, and that branched off into the Cruiserweight stuff, and just stuff like that that makes it a lot more dynamic of a program in terms of the writing. The women's division needs work too. You got like 7 active women on the SmackDown roster and like only 10 on the Raw side. There needs to be, get rid of this women's tag titles because they're useless, or at least build up strong women's tag teams, promote some women from NXT that you're not using and put them on the main roster. Even though people might sour on it, Piper Niven on the main roster, I think she's a great wrestler, and even though it's a silly gimmick, it's something for her to do, and I'm happy for her. Nikki Cross doesn't have a character anymore, she's just a woman on the roster, and likewise with Rhea Ripley, there's not really strong characteristics of these women other than I want to win, and that's my job, you know? More vignettes can help that. I feel that Bianca Belair's stuff on SmackDown with the track and field really kind of understood what she was like as a character, as the EST, and now she's the champion. It feels like a natural fit. I feel like more character work and vignettes are needed. The Aleister Black stuff was fantastic. Last thing I'm going to say about this is to compare what Raw is now to a time that I feel gets overlooked a lot. And people may hate me for this, but Raw, late 2019 to early 2020, was the best that Raw had been in years. Now, I know a lot of people complained about it at the time, but just hear me out. When Paul Heyman had a lot of creative influence, we were seeing new faces in the main event scene, or at least the upper card. We had a lot of simple character work and story building around these guys. AJ Styles and the OC as a strong faction. Rey Mysterio being built up to become US champion. The stuff he did with Brock Lesnar. They were interweaving a lot of stories. You had AJ fighting Mysterio at the same time as Randy Orton. You had the likes of Andrade and Angel Garza coming into their own. Aleister Black and Buddy Murphy's mini feud. Sparkin Murphy joining Rollins' cult. And then you had a lot of strong baby faces at the time. Samoa Joe, the Viking Raiders, Kevin Owens. Stories that we saw culminate at WrestleMania with Owens beating Rollins in a really good match. And there was strong emphasis at the time on promos and character work. Randy Orton becoming this vicious heel. Edge trying to get some redemption upon his return. Aleister Black, his spooky vignettes. Rollins becoming this whiny heel who's forming the basis of his disciple character. And, you know, we had ladder matches and kind of all sorts of variety on Raw. Granted, you had the Rusev Lashley stuff, but honestly, it was wild and it drew ratings, so it is what it is. And there's not really anything that out there anymore, aside from the Alexa stuff, which I feel's run its course. Raw definitely feels stuck right now. It will get a little bit of a kick once the fans are back, but as we've seen before in the past, they will fall into the same patterns. But what am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to book it every Monday night. With my new series on the main channel, it's called Raw Rebooked. Each and every Monday night, I'm going to try and book a Raw show with the same roster, the same champions for the most part, and I'm going to try and book a show that's more interesting and utilise the roster in a more effective manner. Can I do that? Well, you're going to have to be the judge. And this show will be in the format of an actual pick-fed show, like you'd see with NLW, except this is more based in real life, based on the real-life rosters and the characters, using the real-life roster to try and create this more enticing product. But how am I going to do this? Well, I'll show you with this exclusive screenshot of my plans for the first episode. What I've done is created a format with a set number of scheduled matches and segments. Below, I've written every member of the roster that I own in figure form. The ones highlighted in green are the ones that I've booked on the show that week, and that means I can keep track of who's being booked, who's got a storyline going on, and making sure everyone has something to do on the show. And that way I can build more character progression and not forget about talent. It also prevents overexposure. So for instance, if I've seen someone's wrestling the same person twice in a row, I can change that for more variety. And I'll explain the philosophy behind this match card. So first of all, I'm going to kick off with a 24/7 title match. I feel like this gimmick could be an exciting way to start the night because it's Falls Count Anywhere, anything goes, no DQ. Exciting crowd favourite to go out first with Jeff Hardy to get the crowd hyped up, and that contrasts well with Drew Gulak's grounded style, makes for an interesting contest. Next up, we have a champion coming out with Sheamus, interrupts Elias, makes an open challenge, and anyone else not booked in a match is going to get an interview segment to build to next week. For instance, Charlotte Flair, you're going to get to see her build her match. I'm going to use more backstage vignettes to hype the likes of Mustafa Ali and Angel Garza as well. He's got a match against Drew McIntyre. McIntyre will obviously win, but it also gives you a chance to kickstart something between McIntyre and Garza, even though McIntyre may have his eyes on Lashley and the title. It's a little bit of an offshoot, something different. Then finally in the main event, going to give the chance to Humberto to main event against the champion Bobby Lashley. Gives Humberto a chance to shine while also making Lashley look like a legitimate star. Build his win record, but also give Humberto a chance to shine. And after this match, I'm going to have the Hurt Business come down and reform. I think it's a travesty that they were broken up, and honestly, more factions the better for me. I love myself a good faction in wrestling. Gives people something to align themselves with and clearer motivations as a group. And then you've got RK Bro coming down, so I'm going to have a big ending angle with Riddle coming down the ramp on his scooter to take out the Hurt Business, and then RK Bro will stand tall at the end. And that's a feel-good ending to the show, because not only have you seen a heel faction formed that you've missed, you've also got strong baby faces in Riddle and Orton. And I forgot to say earlier, but RK Bro, by far the best thing on Raw. They've got great chemistry, they're funny, but they're also great in the ring. It's a fantastic combination. Push them to the moon, I'd say. And then you've also set up something between Riddle and Lashley, because they feuded earlier in this year for the US title, now it could be for the WWE title. It's a natural progression. Like back in the 90s, you had Rock and Triple H fighting for the IC belt, and then they moved on to the WWE title a year later. So that's kind of the gist of it. I'll show you a couple screenshots now from the debut episode, which will start July the 5th on the main channel. It's going to be a compilation of match highlights, interviews, and it will have the feel of a real Raw show. So if you don't feel like watching Raw for 3 hours every week, you can watch my version instead. My question to you guys is, if you were booking Raw, what would you change or what would you do differently if you were making the shows? Do you watch it? Do you not watch it? Let me know in the comments below. And also, make sure you're subscribed to NLW Figs and like the video to help get the channel out there. Check out the brand new series of my Raw shows coming Monday, July 5th, every single Monday, and I will catch you guys later.